Morning, everyone. Um, I'm going to teach a little bit. We've taught about this before, the fear of the Lord. But in my mind, I had a completely different message that was boiling up in my mind. And when I went to go put it together, it turned into this. And I find it very very deep, but also in me, it's a huge door to life. And a lot of you might not see it the way I see it, but finding, like even last night when I was studying this, I can't wrap my head around how big God is and how great He is and how little we actually know. And anyway, I'm going off of the verse, the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. And lots of people, when they think of the fear of the Lord, they think maybe it's like being scared of God or having a fear that's not a good fear. But the fear of the Lord is not that kind of fear at all. The fear of the Lord is, the best way I find to explain it is like Ray Comfort explains it, or some of the readings I did yesterday. When you're on a mountaintop and you start getting close to the edge, there's a fear that starts building inside of you. And that fear is actually a good fear. That fear protects you. That fear shows you that if you keep going, you're going to fall off, right? So the fear that we're talking about is that kind of fear. It's the fear that gives you wisdom to know more and to protect you. And this fear guides you to peace, love, and all the things of the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, all the gifts that He has for us. But if all of a sudden there's two types of different types of wisdom. So like if all of a sudden we take this to another level, there's two extremes to all of this. If we take this to another level, our fear could be so great that we never climb the mountain to experience that fear, right? So there's two extremes to this. And I want to show you guys the two extremes of wisdom. And I know it might be a little bit mind-boggling and a little bit confusing. And if it is, please ask questions. And if it just takes some time to process, watch this over again because we're recording it. But it can be a little bit extreme on both ends. So if you guys all know Solomon, he was one of the wisest person that ever lived on the face of the earth. So I want to read out of Ecclesiastes some of the things that he wrote down, that he was trying to search out the meaning of life and wisdom. And he just comes to this, well, you guys will hear what he comes to, but I want you guys to see that extreme, then I want you guys to see the other extreme of wisdom. So here we go with another long reading, just like Anna's. But if you try and follow along, I think it'll help you understand what I'm trying to say. So in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, starting in verse 2, Now I'm going to read all the way to chapter 3, verse 14, just to give you a clear picture. So, and this struck me too. When I read this the first time, it was just like, oh, what are we doing here? What's the point of life, right? But in verse 2, he starts off. Yeah. Wrong button. You want a Bible, Larry?
I wouldn't be able to see it.
Okay. Okay. Everything is meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. What do people get for all their hard work? Generations come and go, but nothing really changes. The sun rises and sets and hurries around to rise again. The wind blows south and north, here and there, twisting back and forth, getting nowhere. The rivers run into the sea, but the sea is never full. Then the water returns again to the rivers and flows again to the sea. Everything is so weary and tiresome. No matter how much we see, we are never satisfied. No matter how much we hear, we are not content. History merely repeats itself. It has all been done before. Nothing under the sun is truly new. What can you point to that is new? How do you know it didn't already exist long ago? We don't remember what happened in those former times and in future generations. No one will remember what we are doing now. I, the teacher, was king of Israel. I lived in Jerusalem. I devoted myself to search for understanding and to explore by wisdom everything being done in this world. I soon discovered that God has dealt a tragic existence to the human race. Everything under the sun is meaningless, like chasing the wind. The sun is meaningless, like chasing the wind. What is wrong cannot be rightened. What is missing cannot be recovered. I said to myself, look, I am wiser than any of the kings who ruled in Jerusalem before me. I have greater wisdom and knowledge than any of them. So I worked hard to distinguish wisdom from foolishness. But now I realize that even this was like chasing the wind. For the greater my wisdom, the greater my grief. To increase knowledge only increased my sorrow. I said, chapter 2, I said to myself, come now, let's give pleasure and a try. Let's look for the good things in life. But I found this too was meaningless. It is silly to be laughing all the time. I said, what good does it do to seek only pleasure? After much thought, I decided to cheer myself with wine. While still seeking wisdom, I clutched at foolishness. In this way, I hope to experience the only happiness most people find during their brief life in this world. I also tried to find meaning by building huge homes for myself and planting beautiful vineyards. I made gardens and parks, filling them with all kinds of fruit trees. I built reservoirs, collected with water, and irrigated many flourishing groves. I bought slaves, both men and women, and others were born into my household. I also owned great herds, and yet they will control everything I have gained by my skill and hard work. How meaningless. So I turned to despair. I turned in despair from hard work. It was not the answer to my search for satisfaction in this life. For though I do my work with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, I must leave everything gained to people who haven't worked to earn it. This is not only foolish, but highly unfair. So what do people get for all their hard work? Their days of labor are filled with pain and grief. Even at night, they cannot rest. It is all utterly meaningless. So I decided there is nothing better than to enjoy food and drink and to find satisfaction in work. Then I realized that these pleasures is from the hand of God. For who can eat and enjoy anything apart from him? God gives wisdom, knowledge, and joy to those who please him. But if a sinner becomes wealthy, God takes the wealth away and gives it to those who please him. Even this, however, is meaningless, like chasing the wind. There is a time for everything, a season for every activity under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to harvest. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to rebuild. A time to cry and a time to laugh. A time to grieve and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones and a time to gather stones. A time to embrace and a time to turn away. A time to search and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to throw away. A time to tear and a time to mend. A time to quit and a time to speak. To be quiet and a time to speak up. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. What do people really get for all their hard work? I have thought about this in connection with the various kinds of work God has given people to do. God has made everything beautiful for its own time. He has planted eternity in human hearts, but even so, people cannot see the whole scope of God's work from beginning to end. So I concluded that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to enjoy themselves as long as they can. And people should eat and drink and enjoy the fruits of their labor, for this is the gifts of God. And I know whatever God does is final. Nothing can be added to it or taken from it. God's purpose in this is the people should fear him. Whatever exists today and whatever will exist in the future has already existed in the past. For God calls each event back in its turn. So it kind of just drains you right out. Everything is meaningless, he goes. You know, he's just so upset with what he's trying to find here on earth, and he just finds that everything is just a circle. Just like the sun, it comes up every morning to race around the earth to come up the next morning again. The one that I find fascinating is the rivers keep flowing into the sea, but it never fills up, right? But everything in here on earth, here at the end, he says, for God calls each event back into its turn. So all of a sudden you're like, well, what's the point of being here? What's the point of everything? But one thing I want you guys to see, Solomon constantly uses I. He was using his own wisdom. So, here in the notes, I want to read this to you guys, just so that this picture, this is the extreme of the one side of wisdom, right? Trying to find what this is all about in our own human wisdom, I guess you could say. The alternative to commitment to work is the enjoyment of life as God's good gift. This includes enjoying your work while not allowing it to become the key to meaning in our life. So you see what King Solomon is trying to do here? Or is it very confusing? This is the first of the teacher's admonitions to take life less seriously and enjoy it more. Life is too short to waste it on a treadmill or ever increasing professional accomplishments. In larger scheme of things, our accomplishments will not last. We need to take the time to enjoy the gifts that God gives us. You know, if what he was saying, yes, this is all just the revolving circle. It happens over and over and over. I look at all these guys getting filthy rich. That is all they worked for their whole life, only to give it to somebody that's just going to blow it. What did they really get out of it? They never had time to actually sit down and enjoy what God gave them, because the meaning that they were working for is to get rich or to work hard. I even look at these old, like just this is a picture in my own head. Like I go all over old yards grain backing, right? And we come across a lot of old houses, Henry knows. But in preparing this message, I was just thinking of these old houses that we walk into and look at sometimes. There's probably a mom that really enjoyed her house, and just, this is just a picture made up in my own head. And she's sitting at the kitchen table and something happens on her cupboards. Big mess. And she gets completely wrapped into this picture of why. Why did this have to happen? You know? What's the point of this? Like, why did my cupboards just get completely filthy because somebody broke something on them or somebody spilled something on them? She's wrapped up in her beautiful house and she wants everything to be perfect, right? That's what her meaning of the house is, instead of enjoying the house. Because now when I'm walking into the house, looking at these old houses, the cupboard that she was so worried about getting dirty, the birds are pooping on it right now. The raccoons are walking all over it. They're living in the cupboards. If you look at those two extremes, right? You see the picture I'm trying to paint? What Solomon is trying to do here is to show us, enjoy what God has given you. Don't make it about what he has given you, but enjoy what he has given you. And what he is doing with his own wisdom is, I tried to find, like in all the kingdoms that he built, he was trying to find something in that, and at the end of it he found it's just empty. There's no meaning in it, because just like he said, the people he hired to run everything, they're taking everything from him, and they're using it all anyway. It's not for him. And same with he went to even drinking wine because he's seen all these people that are having pleasure and getting drunk or whatever. So he decides to do that. At the end of that story, he all of a sudden realizes there's no meaning in this. Just destroys you, right? But if you guys have time at home, read the rest of this. There's a lot of wisdom in it. There's 12 chapters, but it makes you realize that what God has given you, enjoy it. Don't make it don't make it part of your life or what your focus is in life. Like the story I just told about the woman in the house, like, or working hard all the time. All that's going to happen is whenever enjoy working, but don't work. Make that the center of your life. All that happens is you die, you get put in the ground, and somebody else takes everything that you've ever made or built up for yourself. You don't even get to enjoy it, right? It's all just going to be gone one day. So This seems depressing, I know. But at the end of all of this, at the end of the chapter, this is the final conclusion that Solomon comes to. And in chapter 12, verse 12, I'll start there. He says, "But my child, be warned. There is no end of opinions ready to be expressed." So there's no end to this. You can study it all you want. All you will find is a circle again. You know, studying them can go on forever and become very exhausting. But here's the final conclusion. Fear God and obey his commands, for this is the duty of every person. God will judge us for everything we do, including every secret thing, whether good or bad. So, I have another little note here I want to read. The teacher shows how living for personal success or pleasure will ultimately cause us to come up empty. Notice how the person pronouns I, me, and my. My stuff. All because of me. I. Dominates this section. So it dominates everything that we just read in the first two chapters of this. The teacher was committed to the gratification of self-interest as the means of making sense of life. So he was looking at just everything that would bring him meaning to life, but he's missing the whole bullseye. The ultimate failure of this approach to discover meaning is an important lesson for us. We need to realize that living for self is ultimately self-destruction. Until we learn this, we will find it unnatural to reach out to help others. So, as long as we just look at everything that Solomon talked about there, like just working, drinking, trying to find pleasure in everything, and over he comes up empty. There's no meaning to it. He's doing it for self. He's not doing it for someone else. As long as you're doing it for yourself, you're just destroying yourself. Does that make sense?
I was just thinking about that. It completely does, because if you work for yourself, you don't work for the Lord, you're not going to become anything. Or not, you'll never become anything, but you won't succeed in anything.
Yeah, everything is meaningless. It just rotates
Yeah,
again.
you're rotating. It's like a tire. You start one track, back to the next track.
And work yourself into the ground. Because a lot of those rich people, if you watch, you kind of look at the way their lives are. They're rich as all out, have everything they possibly could want, but they work every hour of the day.
Yep.
They work at the office and they come home and they go to their home office and work again.
And what's the meaning of that?
Yeah, they can't even enjoy their beautiful house because they're stuck in the office.
Yeah, or the beautiful kitchen cupboard, right? Just enjoy it.
There's a chef in there.
And so often the kids, get sort of left without a parent because of the busyness of the parents.
Well, look at that. It's self-destruction, right? It's all about me, me, me. And then all of a sudden, you don't reach out to your kids. Then what happens to them? But just like he says, the lesson in this is to learn that until we learn this, we will find unnatural to reach out to help others. We need to know this wisdom. We need to know that it's not about us. God put all this into rotation. It's going to keep going in a circle. There's no meaning to all of this. But to fear him, here at the end of it, what he final conclusion that he comes to is to fear God. And if we look at Proverbs, that verse I had, the beginning of all wisdom is to fear God. And when you start seeing this wisdom, then all of a sudden you start finding the meaning of life. And the meaning of life is the commandment to love one another. And the crazy thing about this is people that don't ever go and find the truth in this book, they will just be part of this cycle that's meaningless. At the end of the day, it's all going to be gone. There's a day that's coming where God's going to burn this whole thing. It's going to be wrapped up like a scroll, it says. But I want to go to Colossians chapter 1 right now.
I'm gonna try again to get onto my phone with that.
You go ahead. Keep going. Keep going. Yeah.
You want help?
I think my phone is beyond that.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, you want help? Let's see what you're doing. It sounds like you're a great person.
Well, this is keeping us all awake, right?
One thing, Abe, while you're talking, it's reminded me, we can get focused on so many things, and especially as young guys,
Are you good now?
whether it was me being a pilot, or
I just get back to you. Are you good now?
people I know as pilots, or military, it doesn't matter what we're talking about. Recognize that even as young people, your days are numbered, and your health. Like having my pilot's license, all I had to have is one medical issue, and the doctor, oh, you can't fly anymore. And that was the end of that.
Yeah.
Right? Probably same thing in the military. You come up with a certain medical issue, oh, you're out. You're washed out, right? Exactly. You gotta stay in good shape. So a lot of our jobs and professions, that's what they require. That's just could be a moment's notice. We all know people who even recently, fairly young, all of a sudden just like that, oh, now you're outside. You gotta totally focus, change your focus. And so if your focus is on your profession, or your focus is on a lot of things you're talking about there, it is really, in the end, it is meaningless. You can focus on that and enjoy it for the day, but you don't know if you're gonna have it tomorrow.
Say that a second.
Yeah, even like what you're talking about, the pilot, or even I thought of this verse here, there's a time for war, and then there's a time for peace. This whole thing, it just keeps going in a circle. But it's finding the wisdom inside that sets you free, that lets you enjoy whatever God has put you in, whether that's a pilot, or whether that's a pastor, or whether that's a seat cleaner, or somebody that's wanting to go to train for serving our country, or somebody that's running a bakery. It's finding the wisdom inside the word God has given you. That's what will give you peace. But I want to separate the two wisdoms now, and I hope you guys don't get confused. But here in Colossians chapter 1, verses 9 and 10, Paul says in verse 9, "So we have continued praying for you ever since we first heard about you. We ask God to give you a complete understanding of what He wants to do in your lives. And we ask Him to make you wise with spiritual wisdom. Then the way you live will always honor and please the Lord, and you will continually do good, kind things for others. All the while, you will learn to know God better and better. So, there's the actual, just in my notes here, it's called practical wisdom, and then there's a spiritual wisdom. So I'll just read this to you guys to explain these two verses on a little bit deeper level. We may need some guidelines to help us identify wisdom in our thoughts and choices. According to the Bible, there are two aspects of wisdom: the spiritual and the practical. The spiritual wisdom gives insight into the true nature of things. Paul said, we ask God to give you complete understanding of what He wants to do in your lives. And we ask Him to make you wise with spiritual wisdom. Then you will learn to know God better and better. And those are the two verses that we just read, right? Special wisdom is also sometimes given that your hearts will be flooded with light so that you can understand the wonderful future He has promised to those He called. Godly wisdom can be evaluated by its qualities. The Bible tells us that God's wisdom is first of all pure. It is also peace, loving and gentle at all times, and willing to yield to others. It is full of mercy and good deeds. It shows no partiality, and it always sincere. So, on the practical level of wisdom, our wisdom can be judged by whether or not our actions conform to God's instruction. God's instruction were given to us because they naturally lead to healthy living. Follow them, we can find the wisdom we need to walk toward holiness. This can be one of the standards used in our continually daily inventory. So that's the practical wisdom of things. Just to help you guys understand the practical wisdom a little bit better. Like if I read this note about, I'll read it again. The alternative to commit to work is to enjoyment of life and God's good gift. This includes enjoying our work while not allowing it to become the key to meaning in our life. This is the first of the teacher's admonishments to make life less serious and enjoy it more. Life is too short to waste it on a treadmill or ever-increasing professional accomplishments. So the practical wisdom here, like if I think of the treadmill, like he's saying here, some people, they waste it away because that's what it's all about. Their whole life, they're in the gym, right? But what practical wisdom does is show us that it's good to exercise, but don't make it about everything. Don't make it rule your life. So that wisdom tells us, okay, exercising is good for me, but I'm not going to make it the point of my life. And the spiritual wisdom is what I see these two verses explain to us. The spiritual wisdom is God giving us a complete understanding of what He wants in our lives. So, one of the things that made me think of spiritual wisdom, that gives me meaning to my life, like I was part of this cycle. I was part of this cycle for many years. You know what I did? I hoarded money, and the funny thing was I had none. We would get our calf check at the end of the year, and we'd have this big chunk of money, and we had to pay all of our expenses, and then we had a little bit left over, and usually we would buy something with it because we were so anxious, to have something already. And then we would buy something with it, and then we were back to square one. We were broke again. And then at the beginning of the year, we would start going into our line of credit, and by the end of the year, we were maxed out. Our calf check came again. We would pay all our debt off again, buy something, and I was just part of this cycle, right? Because I was trying to find satisfaction in being rich. And it's so funny how I would, even as Solomon mentions there, it even gives us sleepless nights sometimes, right? And it did me, because I was trying to figure out what day I should sell my calves to where I would get the maximum amount of money. Where in my small little mind, God is controlling the auctions, right? So I can take him whenever I want. He can make this auction good and he can make that one bad. I mean, doesn't matter what I think, right? But I was just caught up in this cycle of I wanted a big ranch and I wanted all these cows and all this land, and I wanted to be rich. That's what I was working for. And I found all of a sudden in 2018, this is all meaningless. It's just, even if I gain all of that, I would want more. I would never find meaning. And that's all, we can look at the practical wisdom of that too. Again, we can say, okay, God wants us to work. God wants us to have cows and wants us to have a good life, but he doesn't want me to make that the meaning of my life, right? So that's the wisdom that shows us, okay, just enjoy what God has given me. He'll bless it. He'll increase it if he wants. He'll take it away if he wants. But while he's giving it to me, enjoy it, right? Don't make it the purpose of my life. So in 2018, I learned the spiritual wisdom. Up to that point, I should say last night, I got to know the practical wisdom on a deeper level, right? But the spiritual wisdom is this. In John chapter 1, verses 1 through 13. This changed my life. In the beginning, we had this at Bible study Friday. In the beginning, the Word already existed. He was God. Or he was with God and he was God. He was in the beginning with God. He created everything there is. So who is the Word? He was already here in the beginning. He already existed. He was with God and he was God. He created everything there is. This whole cycle we're talking about, he created it all. Nothing exists that he didn't make. Life itself was in him. So the breath we breathe in and out, life in existence, animals, us humans, it's in him. And this life gives light to everyone. The light shines through the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it. No darkness can ever extinguish light. We know that. When we come in here, we turn that light switch on, darkness is instantly gone. You can't come in, when there's light in here, you can't come in here and extinguish the light. Light always dominates over darkness. God sent John the Baptist to tell everyone about the light, so that everyone might believe because of his testimony. John himself was not the light. He was only a witness of the light. The one who is the true light, who gives light to everyone, was going to come into the world. But although the world was made through him, the world didn't recognize him when he came. So the people that Jesus walked amongst, he came to his own people, the people he created. He walked amongst the people he actually made, and they wouldn't even recognize who he was. Even in his own land and among his own people, he was not accepted. But to all who believed him and accepted him, he gave the right to become children of God. They are reborn. This is not a physical birth resulting in human passion or plan. This rebirth comes from God. So the Word became human and lived here on earth among us. He was full of unfailing love and faithfulness, and we have seen his glory and the glory of the only Son of the Father. So this wisdom here is a spiritual wisdom. You know, when we go back to fear the Lord is the beginning of all wisdom. If we never fear the Lord, we will never find this wisdom here. We will never find that we need a rebirth to find the spiritual wisdom. Like if we never take time to read this book, this is the crazy thing about it. We will never find the true meaning of life. Ever. We'll just be part of that cycle. Because the only wisdom we know is I, me, and my. That's the only wisdom we know. But when we find this wisdom, that he came to give us meaning, he came to die for us because we couldn't be with God in our sinful nature. He came to die for us, to pay for that price so that we could be with him and be reborn. This rebirth is a treasure that is worth more than we have wisdom to explain. And how this wisdom works is absolutely fascinating. If you look at somebody like Bill Gates, you know, he's created all these things in the world now. He's on top of the world, right? Doing all these computer stuff and building chips to put in humans. And his wisdom is great in his own eyes, right? But as long as he doesn't know the spiritual wisdom, nothing. Because he's just part of that cycle Solomon was talking about. It's meaningless at all. Right? So, to find the true meaning in life is Jesus Christ. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, I want to read from verses 18 through 30 to show you guys the spiritual wisdom. Through 30. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, explains this here so well. That if you don't know him, if you don't fear him, you have no wisdom actually. Verse 18, I know very well how foolish the message of the cross sounds to those who are on the road to destruction. But we who are being saved recognize this message as the very power of God, as the scriptures say. It will destroy human wisdom and discard their most brilliant ideas. So, somebody like Bill Gates, I think I'm saying that's the right guy, right? If you look at that, he says, I will destroy human wisdom and discard their most brilliant ideas. Because I'm not saying that he does, but a lot of these guys, if I were to go tell him about Jesus Christ and what he did for us, they would laugh at me. They would mock me. They would look at that message as a foolish message of the cross because they think they've got it all figured out. But all of a sudden they'll come to the same conclusion that Solomon came to. And this is very deep. To know this is just mind-boggling because most people don't know this. But they'll come to the same conclusion that in everything they created and everything that they did and everything they accomplished here on earth, that it's just part of a cycle. Somebody else will stand up and do it all over again. But they don't know that wisdom. But verse 20 says, so where does this leave the philosophers and the scholars and the world's brilliant debaters? God has made them all look foolish. God has made them all look foolish and has shown their wisdom to be useless nonsense. Since God in his wisdom saw to it that the world would never find him through human wisdom, he has used our foolish preaching to save all who believe. So, all these philosophers, scholars, and world's most brilliant debaters, God has made them look foolish and has shown them their wisdom is useless and nonsense because all of a sudden one day they're just going to see that all of this is meaningless. It's empty. There's nothing in it. There's got to be meaning to life, and they're trying to find it in the things that they're doing, right? All their hard work, all the things that they created is all just part of a cycle. In verse 21, since God in his wisdom saw it that the world would never find him through human wisdom, he used our foolish preaching to save all who believe. God's way seems foolish to the Jews because they didn't want a sign from him to prove it is true. So the Jews want to see some miraculous sign so that they can believe this is true. That, the meaning of life is actually Jesus Christ. And it's foolish to the Greeks because they believe only what agrees with their own wisdom. So just like I was telling you earlier, I don't know Bill Gates or where he stands with the Lord, but this is just an example. If I were to go preach him the truth and all the wisdom that he has built in his own mind here on earth, he's going to look at the message that I'm bringing to him as foolishness. Who do you think you are? Who are you? Oh, you live in Saskatchewan on a little acreage? Okay. And this is so marvelous. This is what's, like, it blows my mind that God uses the rubbish, the jail. And this is one of the teachings she had the one Sunday morning. And above the teaching, I didn't even know who we were talking about. I just wrote, you would let them grow, and that people would find the true meaning of life, and that it's only you. And if we find you, we